Imagine spending an entire year banging on about how economic growth is your #1 mission, your absolute top priority, the thing you're staking your entire government's reputation on, and then presiding over an economy that's essentially flatlining. Well, you don't have to imagine it, because that's exactly what Labour has done in 2025. Welcome back to UK Political Insight, where we dissect the political carnage so you can make sense of the madness. Today we're talking about Labour's catastrophic failure on their self-proclaimed #1 mission. And spoiler alert, it's only going to get worse. Growth has stagnated, unemployment surging, and Britain sliding down the global rankings while Rachel Reeves tries to convince us everything's going according to plan. Let's dive into this economic disaster, shall we? So let's start with the basics. Labour came into power with a very clear message: growth, growth, growth. They repeated it like a mantra. Keir Starmer said it was their #1 mission, not improving the NHS, not fixing housing, not education. Growth. They staked everything on it. And Starmer was very specific about how he wanted to be judged. He said, measure us on GDP per capita, which is economic output per person. Basically, are people actually getting richer, or are we just treading water? It's a sensible metric because you can have overall GDP growth just from population increase, but that doesn't mean anyone's actually better off. GDP per capita tells you whether living standards are genuinely improving. Here's the problem. On that exact measure, the one Starmer himself chose, Britain is not getting any richer. GDP per capita has essentially flatlined. We're stagnating while other countries are surging ahead. It's like entering a race, announcing to everyone that you're going to win, choosing the exact criteria by which you want to be judged, and then coming in near the back of the pack. That's not just failure, that's spectacular, well-documented, self-inflicted failure. You literally told everyone how to grade your performance and then failed by your own standards. Rachel Reeves has been trying to spin this as success, claiming the economy has beaten forecasts. But here's the thing about forecasts. When your initial predictions were absolutely terrible, slightly less terrible than expected isn't exactly cause for celebration. It's like failing an exam, but being proud because you got 28% instead of the predicted 25%. You still failed. You're still nowhere near passing. The fact that you failed slightly less dramatically than anticipated doesn't change the fundamental reality that you failed. The Center for Economics and Business Research just released their World Economic League table, and it shows the UK is expected to fall in global rankings when it comes to output per person. We're literally sliding backward while other nations are moving forward. Countries that were behind us are catching up or overtaking us. Emerging economies are embracing reform, innovation, and investment, and they're reaping the rewards. Meanwhile, Britain is stuck in neutral, watching everyone else accelerate past us while we make excuses about why things are harder than we thought they'd be. What makes this even more damning is that Labour had every advantage when they came into power. The Conservatives had left behind a mess, absolutely, but they also left behind falling inflation, interest rates that had peaked and were starting to come down, and energy prices that were stabilizing. The conditions for a recovery were there. All Labour had to do was not mess it up, and somehow they've managed to mess it up anyway. That actually takes effort. Part of the problem is the absolute disaster of a budget Rachel Reeves delivered. She called it a budget for growth, but it was actually a budget that punished businesses, raised taxes on employment through national insurance increases, and created massive uncertainty about the government's economic strategy. Businesses need stability and predictability to invest and expand. What they got instead was a chancellor who talks about growth while simultaneously making it harder and more expensive to employ people. It's like trying to encourage someone to go swimming while actively filling the pool with concrete. And then there's the benefits budget, which ended the year by making it crystal clear that Labour's priorities are completely backward. The budget rewarded welfare over work. Now, there's nothing wrong with a strong social safety net. Nobody's arguing against supporting people who genuinely need help. But when your welfare policies create situations where working doesn't significantly improve someone's financial situation compared to not working, you've built a system that actively discourages employment. And an economy that discourages work is an economy that will never grow sustainably. It's basic economic logic that seems to have completely escaped this government. The unemployment figures tell the story. Unemployment has surged throughout 2025. More people are out of work, fewer people are actively participating in the economy, and that's a disaster for growth. Every person not working is both a lost contributor to economic output and an additional burden on public finances. It's a double hit that compounds over time, and the longer people are out of work, the harder it becomes for them to get back into work, because skills atrophy and employers become wary of employment gaps. Labor's policies are creating long-term structural problems that will take years to fix, even after they're eventually voted out. Here's what's particularly frustrating. A weak economy isn't just about abstract numbers and statistics. It affects literally every corner of daily life. Job opportunities dry up, so people can't find work or improve their career prospects. Wages stagnate or fall in real terms, so even people who are working find their living standards declining. Public services suffer because tax revenues don't keep pace with spending needs, so the NHS stays in crisis, schools struggle for funding, and infrastructure continues to crumble. National security is compromised because we can't afford to invest in defense properly. Everything is connected, and when the economy fails, everything else fails with it. The most frustrating part of this entire situation is that it's completely avoidable. Britain is not a poor country. We have world-class universities, a talented workforce, historic strengths in financial services, technology, creative industries, and manufacturing. We have the rule of law, relatively stable institutions, and the English language as a massive natural advantage in global commerce. We have every ingredient necessary for a thriving economy. What we lack is a government capable of creating the conditions for that potential to be realized. The solution really isn't complicated. Britain needs policies that reward work, enterprise, and innovation. We need fiscal discipline so we can deliver stability and eventually start bringing taxes down. We need to make the UK an attractive place for investment by cutting unnecessary levies and red tape. We need to ensure our talent is actually harnessed to drive growth instead of being wasted through poor policy choices. None of this is revolutionary economic thinking. It's basic stuff that successful countries do as a matter of course. The Conservatives have laid out what this could look like in practice. Get spending under control so you're not borrowing recklessly for day-to-day expenses. Cut the deficit through sensible fiscal management. Boost businesses by cutting business rates, especially on high streets where physical retail is struggling to compete with online giants. Help households by abolishing stamp duty on family homes, which would improve housing market liquidity and help younger people get on the property ladder. Introduce a first job bonus to reward work and make it easier for young people to enter the workforce. These are concrete policies that would strengthen the economy and lift living standards. Now, you might be thinking, but the Conservatives were in power for 14 years and didn't fix everything either. And you'd be right. They made mistakes, they faced unprecedented challenges with COVID and the energy crisis, and they left behind problems that needed addressing. But here's the crucial difference. The Conservatives never claimed that growth was their number one mission measured by a specific metric and then presided over that metric flatlining. Labour has set themselves up for this criticism by being so explicit about their priorities and then failing so comprehensively to deliver on them. Rachel Reeves has having what can only be described as an annus horribilis. The budget was a disaster that spooked markets and businesses. The inheritance tax fiasco alienated farmers and rural communities. Business confidence has plummeted, investment decisions are being delayed or canceled. The Bank of England has had to keep interest rates higher for longer, partly because of uncertainty about fiscal policy. And through it all, Reeves has maintained this bizarre cheerfulness, insisting that everything's fine and we're on track, when literally all the evidence suggests otherwise. It's like watching the Titanic sink while the captain insists we're just stopping to collect ice for the drinks. The real tragedy here is the missed opportunity. When Labour won that massive majority, they had a genuine chance to set a new direction for the country. People were willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. Businesses wanted to work with a stable government. International investors were waiting to see what the new administration would offer. And Labour has squandered all of that goodwill through a combination of poor policy choices, weak communication, and a fundamental misunderstanding of what drives economic growth. You only get one chance to make a first impression with voters and markets, and Labour has blown it comprehensively. Looking ahead to 2026, there's no reason to expect things will improve unless there's a fundamental change in approach. The policies that have failed in 2025 are still in place. The mindset that produced those policies is still dominant within government. Labor faces a choice, and it's actually pretty simple. They can continue down this path of rising debt, higher taxes, and stagnant growth, or they can admit they got it wrong and change course. They can prioritize political survival, clinging to their ideological commitments even as they demonstrably fail, or they can prioritize national prosperity and do what actually works even if it means admitting error. History will judge this labor government not by their rhetoric about growth, but by the actual results they deliver. Future generations won't care that Starmer talked about growth being their #1 mission. They'll care whether opportunities were created or whether they were allowed to slip away. They'll care whether their parents' living standards improved or declined. They'll care whether Britain maintained its position as a leading economy or whether we fell behind our competitors because